The last of our presenters, before we get to Lucy's summing up, the title of the session is The Importance of Longer Term Thinking. I mean, sustainability itself, the word, implies longevity. We've heard people talking about we've got to be strategic, not tactical. To talk to us about that right now, one of the bright young minds of the FM industry today, COO of the Churchill Group, James Bradley.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you all for a great day. I've certainly taken lots of notes, lots to think about coming from this, but I thought I'd start by sharing with you a note I've taken that's un-ESG related. Don't take the last presentation of the day. For three reasons. One, it's very hard not to cover other people's content. Two, I've really got to try my best to be funny. And third, and probably the worst thing, I'm between you all and the drinks outside. So on that note, I'll get cracking, and hopefully this is an interesting presentation for you. Where's the clicker? Oh, it's here. Someone's hidden it. There we go. So I'm here to talk, as Martin said, about long-term thinking when it comes to ESG. And I really want today to be thinking about it as an industry, and I hope some of the things I've got to say are sort of thought-provoking and interesting for everyone to take away. So, I think, after listening to everyone today, I'm preaching to the converted when I say that we need to think about ESG on a long-term basis, and I'm sure everyone in this room hopefully agrees with me. And perhaps I think the general public are starting to agree, and momentum is gathering in this space. We've talked about COP26 and some of the long-term initiatives coming out of that and commitments. We've got changing regulation to help drive this into global economics. But also we've got lots of businesses and organisations that we've heard from today that are starting to set targets, set goals, and set principles to help themselves and everyone within those businesses and the clients they serve evolve their ESG objectives. And we haven't heard from Keith at the CCS framework today, but I know some people have mentioned it. And for example, we've got the CCS putting 10% of its tendering weight towards ESG. So hopefully those things will help drive the long-term agenda when it comes to ESG. But I thought I'd start with why. What is the point? Why are we talking about ESG today? I guess for me, probably overarchingly, as someone else has said it already, it is the right thing to do. I'm sure we all agree on that, and I'm sure we are all people that like to do the right thing. But interestingly, when I was thinking about this in advance of today, we are all in the services industry. Whether we're an in-house, in-sourced team providing services to a particular client or organisation, or whether we're a pure play services business, we are all service providers. And for me, we do two things within that. We therefore employ a lot of people. I think, Martin, you said earlier, 3.5 million, plus their families, but also we're providing services to others. So that grows exponentially when we think about all the people that we can affect. So for that reason, I think we have a responsibility to be thinking about ESG in the long term, but I also think, and I'll come on to this later, there's real value there. And then secondly, I think it's fair to say our whole industry exists around the built environment. So by that nature, we have an absolute responsibility to help ourselves not affect the wider environment when operating in the built environment. But also, I think, and I'm going to pick on Guy as well because he's not here, but I think Guy made a really good point earlier around let's not forget our clients. And of course, as an industry, we have an opportunity to support our clients to improve their ESG capabilities as well. So for me, maybe controversially, but as a sector, have we ever had a unifying purpose before that brings us all together as an industry? We all do great things for our customers and for our clients. I think that's an absolute given, or I hope so. But ultimately, aside from that, the services we deliver, have we had anything as a sector before that brings us together? And I think that ESG could be that very thing. So, I wanted to start. I've lost my title, so you'll have to bear with me. It should have said a willingness to collaborate. So I wanted to start really by talking about that willingness to collaborate, and I've got a few examples here that hopefully will help explain where I'm coming from with this. So the top left-hand corner, we've got Coca-Cola, Heinz and Plant Bottle. A lot of you might be aware that in 2009, Coca-Cola were really pleased to announce to the world that they'd created the first ever plant-based bottle. The problem was that it was only 30% plant-based, and the rest of it was the usual plastics that we were all trying desperately to avoid. So what they realised is they needed to collaborate with other organisations, and they started working with Heinz. Particularly Heinz brought the manufacturing skills to be able to build something, prototypes, etc., that ultimately led, and I'm sure a lot of you saw back in October 2021, very recently, the collaboration has successfully created a 100% plant-based bottle, and one that actually is importantly scalable for us all to start to use across the world. And I think that's a great example of where collaboration could be really key to long-term success. And then the other one I was just going to touch on, and perhaps it's a little bit abstract, but those of you that know me know I'm a little bit strange when it comes to analogies, is the Olympics. And I want to take you all back to 1996. They were the Olympic Games at Atlanta City. And some of you might remember those particular Olympic Games because the Great British team had an absolutely woeful performance, and we dropped from our usual sort of top 5, top 10 medal space as a country in the global arena down to, I think it was like 36th place or something, and we only secured 1 gold medal. And the reason why I wanted to explain this is because 1996 then took the British Olympics Association to think that actually they needed to reform, they needed to collaborate. And that led to investment and professionalism within the Great British Olympics Association, and obviously all the athletes that then came out the back of that. And if we fast forward on, after a long-term collaboration with the National Lottery and various other people from the private sector, in 2008, so nearly 20 years ago, sorry, get that right, in 2008, so over 20 years ago, we were back in the top 5, 20 years later, sorry, we were back in the top 5 medals, and we obviously had that real high in 2012 when we were even higher up the table, and we've stayed in the top 4 ever since. But when I drilled into that, and my point really here was that I noticed 2 things. The FM industry is made up of really big corporate players, and also I think it's fair to say there's lots of small SMEs and one-person bands and everything in between. And I looked at 2 different stories. I'm sure you're all familiar with the BMX legend Kai White, who won silver in the Tokyo Olympic Games. He was a success story from large-scale corporate collaboration, from humble beginnings at the Peckham BMX track that was run and funded by the National Lottery, through to winning silver in the Tokyo Olympics. And I thought that was a great example of long-term collaboration on a large scale. But meanwhile, hopefully you've all heard of Emily Campbell as well. So Emily Campbell also won silver at the Tokyo Olympic Games in weightlifting. But her story was very different because she went to the British Olympics Association, said, I want to go for the Olympics. And they said, actually, we don't fund that sport. It's not a sport that we deem as something that we want to fund. So she actually had to go alone. But the moral of the story here is she collaborated on a very small scale with the local market to provide food and nutrition she needed to succeed, but also with the local gym that actually extended their opening hours free of charge for her so she could get the training she needed. And for me, I thought that was a fantastic example of why, yes, we should collaborate on a large scale with big corporate businesses, but also there's no excuse for not collaborating on a smaller scale as well. So, could FM become the benchmark sector for success in ESG? I mentioned earlier, could it be our unifying purpose? I personally think it could be coming into today, and I'm even more convinced after listening to all the speakers today. And I think, for me, investing in ESG in the future of our organisations is probably the most strategic thing we can all do in this room. We can all do as a sector, because it's looking after the future welfare of our people, of the planet, and everything else in between. So I also think the very nature of ESG drives sustainable business, so it's a no-brainer, right? Some of you might not thank me for this, but just to put it into perspective around long-term thinking, I looked at the ONS statistics for people that were employed in February 2022. And what I learned was that the average person working in employment in 2022 in February had 30 years left to work. So some of you might be thinking that doesn't sound very good, but that's the reality. And therefore, I do think we can afford to take a long-term view when it comes to ESG, because we've got lots of people that are working in our organisations, in our clients' organisations now, that can see this journey through for a long period of time and, of course, be succeeded by the next generation. Authenticity. I think I said that right. So for me, that's being true to one's purpose. I've talked about, could ESG be our sector's purpose? Could it be something that we all collaborate on and really push forward as a sector? Could we be the benchmark sector for all things ESG? And for me, reflecting back on authenticity, if we look at the last decade or so, I think some of the most successful organisations around being authentic have come from the tech sector. So if you take Apple, for example, I'm sure we've all heard of, they've got a unifying purpose, and you might recognise it, but it's to enrich people's daily lives. And what was interesting for me when I was reading that is, if you can bring together a group of people, whether it's in one organisation or across a whole sector, they can achieve some pretty awesome things. And a little fact that I was told the other day is that the market capitalisation, or the value of Apple, for want of a better description, is actually greater than the whole of the FTSE 100 put together. So perhaps being authentic isn't so bad after all. So on the sort of slide here, these are all things that we've been discussing ourselves at Churchill, which is where I work with some of my colleagues here today. And for example, one of the ones I'd pick out is we've been discussing as we consider ESG, and we haven't talked much about the G today, but do we, for example, need to change our leadership styles to be able to govern companies that are going to be better focused on that E and that S? And there's loads of other questions along those lines that we've been asking ourselves. And I guess I've tried to be quick for you all. So where I really wanted to leave it today was, wouldn't it be great off the back of today, let's take this momentum, let's get together as a sector as much as we can, and let's collaborate to see how far we can take ESG, and hopefully we can do that together for the long term. So thanks for listening. If you want to get involved, you can get in touch with us. You can scan the QR code to leave your details, or you can email us, or you can tweet us. But it'd be great to keep the conversation going. Hopefully you all agree, and thank you very much.